again. It's our second speaker series of the semester and the last of the year. Thank you so much again for being here on a Friday. I really appreciate it. I know it may not be the best time of the week for you to be here, but also I want to thank Dr. Susana Beltrán-Grimm for flying all the way from Portland, Oregon.
Oh,
Join us.
I wake up at 4 a.m., 3 a.m. for all of you.
Hey.
So it's really quick. We met. We actually have never met before.
Yes,
in
this is the first time.
we met through a writing group, online virtual writing group when I was still Dr. and Dr. Beltrán was a postdoc at Purdue University. So we just met virtually online for every week for almost a year. Yeah, it was COVID years. So that's how we developed our relationship. So I'm gonna go read a little bit of her bio. So Dr. Susana Beltrán-Grimm is an assistant professor of applied developmental psychology and education at Portland State University. She holds an EDD in educational psychology with a specialization in learning technologies from 2000. Prior to coming to PSU, she was a postdoctoral research associate in the human development and family science at Purdue University. Her research focuses on asset-based approaches to examine the home math environment, explore children's digital media and tools, identify Latine families' social and cultural context, and center co-design approaches to promote equity in research methods. Now I'll hand it over to you.
Yes, we met on a writing virtual group, and I am so grateful that she invited me to come and present my research with all of you. I'm super excited to get to know you. I did wake up at 3 a.m., so if my brain is not working later on, please forgive me. And then I have to come to the hotel, and then I have to come here. So I'm on like no food except coffee and cookies, but I'll survive. I'm really excited to be with all of you. I'm gonna have to stay here because my 3 a.m. brain forgot my clicker. But I hope you all understand that I'm just gonna be kind of doing like a dancing move right now here and there. But yes, thank you again. I'm so excited to be here. Today's presentations, I'm going to be talking about STEM equitable learning environments, and specifically with co-design methodologies. Has anybody heard about co-design? Yeah, what have you heard?
Just what you said.
Besides me, has anybody heard about co-designs besides me? Thank you, yes.
Yeah, I know about it specifically through projects and at work where they're designing at the high school level of like redesigning what high school and co-designing with families and students.
Well, this is the perfect talk for you, and you'll get to know a little bit more. Mine is younger children, so you'll get to see the full spectrum. Has anybody heard about co-design? Yeah. Has anybody heard about participatory research methods? Yes. What have you heard about participatory research methods before? The right answer. She gave a perfect answer.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so everybody.
Whiteboard.
So perfect. Yes. So you are learning a little bit of what I'll be presenting. Yes, there's a lot of terminology in academia. Yes, white part. So some of my stuff mixes the white part, the co-design, the participatory research methods to really just kind of have fun with families. And I'm going to be sharing a little bit more about that with all of you. See if this works.
You want a clicker? I have one.
Oh my gosh, I will love you forever.
Okay, Olive.
Again, if you want to come and work with Portland. So yes, while she's doing that, I'm gonna just quickly tell you about who I am. My physicality and theory and praxis, where I come from, who I am, my identity, and why I get to do what I do, and why I love what I get to do. I was born in Mexico. You can see a little me in that photo. Cuernavaca. Has anybody been to Mexico? Anybody heard of Cuernavaca? We call it the city of the eternal spring. Born in Mexico, I migrated to California when I was 14 years old, not speaking a single word of English. Went through high school, undergrad, graduate, Pepperdine doctoral program in California. and just moved to Portland, my first time out of California last year. But I also kind of bring like a little bit of a different traditional academia path. Thank you so much. I'm like, Anma might be able to help me. Am I doing- Oh, thank you, thank you,
I
thank
use
you.
it every day.
I bring a different perspective in academia. At the top, I used to work with public media, PBS Kids. Has anybody heard about that?
Yes.
Yes. So yes, I used to work with PBS Kids before and doing applied research. So when I was working at PBS Kids, I got to do a lot of wonderful work with kids and families, and specifically in the Los Angeles station. I got to work with a lot of Spanish-speaking Latino families because in LA, if you've ever been to LA, we tend to be the majority there. All Spanish-speaking, coming from immigrant backgrounds. Not yet. I'm gonna go
Yeah,
back. That work at public media, you can see here and over there, working in children's media, doing a lot of work with families, introducing concepts really inspired me to go get my master's and eventually my doctor of education, not thinking that I was gonna end up in academia. So I thought I'm just gonna stay in public media, get to do my own work with families. But I was doing a lot of applied research and I really got to love what I got to do there. And so it took me to this path of more research in life and to do more academic work. But I share this footage because this is still who the person that I am, even 40 years old.
I
After
think
many-
your battery's dead.
It's totally
It was
fine.
giving me issues this morning.
After all
Before
these
it
years,
died today.
really, thank you so much though. You're still admitted to my PhD program. After all these years, I still speak Spanish. I'm a very proud Mexican woman who lives in the United States as Latina, identifies Latina, but I really love my culture. I love being embedded and understanding my culture and how my culture influences the work that I do. Both of my parents passed away when I was 10, and so that was the reason that I moved to California. And my sister raised me with no education. She didn't even complete it. The third grade, she moved to the United States to work in the field in the Bracero program. And she raised me and always wanted the best for me and pushed me to go get an education. And she had all this wonderful, what we call it in theory, funds of knowledge. Have you ever heard about that? Garcia, Moll, Gonzalez. My sister had this wonderful funds of knowledge that the school, almost school, did not recognize. And so really she inspired me to do the work that I do with families, to really see the value in their cultural identity and the funds of knowledge, and to really see how I can help parents in the top picture work with the little ones and get them to a school ready. So that's who I am. And thank you for sharing a space with me. And so all of that really also influences my research approach and how I think about my research. I think about families at the center. Yes, it is still child center, but my primary work centers with educators that work with little ones, with families that have little ones, with any primary caregiver. And really thinking about funds of knowledge, the integrated model of minority. Has anybody heard that from colleagues? It's a framework that I use. Highly recommend I can share more about it. Polling folks for 1996. We traditionally understand child development through westernized lens, through westernized theories like Vygotsky and Piaget. I consider myself a Vygotskian, but I don't think fully paints a picture of diverse children. So Cole and colleagues in 1996 came up with this framework to really think about the diverse perspectives of different children who came from minoritized backgrounds. And so I use that framework to explore families. I use participatory action research or participatory research methods to really make my research social, equitable, and participatory to really dig at the families at the center. So with that in mind, I always have 3 questions when I do co-design. I love co-design because I think it provides a little bit of a playing field with families and children. I still critique co-design even though I use it a lot because I don't think it's really equitable. But I do have these 3 questions that guide the work that I do. I tend to think about how does my role fit and looks like when I work with families, when I work with educators, when even I'm giving this presentation to all of you. How can I understand my positionality, even my privilege as an immigrant woman I am a citizen. I don't have to worry about having to deal with the petitions, so that allows me a little bit of privilege and power. I am an educator woman compared to the families and the children that I work with. So I always have to think about that in my role as a researcher and even as a practitioner. And how does my positionality shape the research methods and the approaches that I use? And all of you, you all are master students, correct? Are some of you thinking about a PhD in the future? But even if you're not thinking about PhD in the future, you want to think about as a practitioner that way, right? Who is a teacher here? Who wants to be a teacher? Who's a teacher? Currently a teacher, raise your hand. Who wants to be a teacher? Okay, so there, there is a practitioner component, right? So you want to think about that too, about your positionality as a teacher, your positionality in the practitioner methods that you use in your classroom, that you will be using in your classroom, and potentially if you're interested in your PhD, research components. So with that, all that said, have more questions, because the more research you do, the more questions you have. And the more you come to realize that you don't know anything. I have two questions. I always think about whose outcomes does my research primarily benefit? And are there unintended consequences to the research approaches that I use? So who gets harm and who gets benefit? Even in the process that I think it's equitable, it might not be truly equitable. So I really think about this work when I think about co-designing, because there is this sort of movement, almost like a movement with participatory research methods, about thinking of including the voices of the community, the youth, like high schoolers, children, and families. But are we really taking their voices into account? Are they really co-designing, co-creating, and are they really being the co-researchers that we hope them to be? So more questions in the field. So co-design to me then means a collaborative approach that I use with family, and these are all real photos with permission with all the families that I work with. I'm really thinking about a holistic way that I can bring materials, resources, knowledge, skills, cultural identity, cultural components, and culture beyond race and ethnicity. We all have a culture that is just, beyond just identifying myself as a woman, and really bringing all of this to really think about a product. If I work at PBS Kids Media, designing an educational app, to think of program service. If I'm working with an organization to develop an educational website, or to think about an intervention, like a research, an artistic, randomized control trial. So I think about all of that. And what is next? So design is not any specific solution. So a lot of people think, oh, we just could design and we solve all the problems in the world. It is not that. It is also not easy. It's okay that it's not easy, because it gets to be messy, and I love messiness. But when you do co-design, that's when you get the real data. That's when you let go of the structures, your traditional academic training, and you really engage with what the parents want, what the families want, and what an educator might want. And you get to be messy, and that is my favorite part. And in academia, nobody likes to be messy. So it's been a struggle for a lot of collaborators to just let go of these structures that tell us we have to do it one way, because co-design is open to everything. What it is to me, it's an opportunity to understand our participants inside and outside, a chance to invoke a new style building solution, and it is fun. It's hard, it's not easy, but it is fun and amazing. So I'm gonna stop there. Does anybody have any questions before I tell you about the research studies that I do? Questions? This is like impacting you already?
Yeah, like, put your hand up.
Yeah, oh yeah. No. Is that a question? Just saying hi?
No, I do have a question. I just don't like to no. When you started at, can you talk a little bit more of your progression from being at PBS Kids to how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, and the mothership is like 20 minutes away from here. Yes, so I always wanted to work with families. That's why you see the work that in the photos that I do. Always wanted to do early childhood. It comes from one, I grew up with my parents. I told you both that my both parents passed away when I was 10 years old. And my sister influenced me how much she got to learn when I test something with her or I practice with her. And I just love parents. So that just happened to take me to public media because they were designing a parent program. And it was perfect timing. I didn't even know it was public media. I got to the interview and I was like, oh, paper, it's here. So yes, I didn't know it was public media, but it just got to that work and I did that work with them, the apply work. I was there for 8 years, and then throughout those 8 years, I was starting to ask questions. I was starting to have questions and to be like, what is this happening? Remember talking about these 3 questions and these 2 questions. What is going on? Why are we using this method when it's all through a Westernized lens, but we don't really think about diverse families? What other framework can I use? Because all the families that we work with in public media are Spanish speaking too as well. So how can we think about it? And so that just took me to get a doctor of education and thinking like, I want to learn more about the theory behind it to really make it more evidence-based of what we're doing locally. But any other questions?
The thought with this, the tools that you design out of the classroom or and like
And that is a perfect segue to then move into the first study. Perfect segue. So one of the first studies that I do, what's your name? So yes, it could be both. The goal is to really think about how do we engage families and understand families in formal settings and what's happening in that engagement at home so that we could make the connection to the formal classroom by providing teacher trainings or pre-service, in-service teacher trainings, or by providing other type of resource to the school or district that they're able to use to make that connection stronger. So the first one was to work with Latina mothers and co-designing a math activities. So in this research, a lot of the families, when I interview them, and the papers, you can Google my name and papers will be there, the published papers. But in this study, when I interviewed moms, they all said, well, math is in your genes. I'm not a math person. I don't like math. You have to be smart to do math. You have to be of a specific color to be do math because they were in the US. And so automatically they thought that they were not good for math. So I use the co-design methodologies to really think about engaging them in the process of self-efficacy and to really get them to understand how math is in everyday space. So I put this example because this is my favorite one. This is a viñeta de pláticas, which is pretty much like a storytelling tool that I use with families to engage them to think about different steps in their math activity. And you can see here, you might not recognize it. It's a board game in Mexico, Culebras y Escaleras. If anybody has that? Okay, some of you have. It's like a board game, non-math game, just like a board game. And this mom said, I used to play this in my home country. I think she was from El Salvador. With my family, I had wonderful memories about it. It was really fun, and I want to use something similar to teach my kid math. And so then we went into prototyping what that would look like to an actual math activity. And it's in Spanish, but you cannot see the language. And in the activity, it was a very intentional process and complex process of adding in subtraction for a little one. And it was really crazy to see how much in the interviews they were like, well, it's in your genes. You can only do math if it's in your genes. And here they were doing wonderful math activities, right? That they could do for their children. But they really engaged in this co-creation where I facilitated. I did not, I have to remind people because there's always this question, did you do the activity for them? I only facilitated the engagement through the co-design prompts that I created. And you can find more of those prompts in my papers that I published. but it's just facilitating the engagement, that thinking, that cognitive development as adults in themselves that got them to really think about this wonderful math activity. And so then the when, and these are photos that they sent me. I did not request these photos, but they send it to me saying things like, oh, I see math every day now. You know, we go to the park, we go to this, we're carrying a kite, we're doing this activity. And it was sort of this process of really kind of increasing the self-efficacy or math efficacy that I didn't have at the beginning, and that motivation in them to really to get them to think about they can do math. It's just the math that they do might not be recognized in the formal classroom, but it's still math, and that can still support children at home, and then eventually make that connection with them. So the mom at the top was like, we took them for a walk and we started counting rocks now and all these processes. And so you can see that sort of journey that they went from, I hate math, I'm not good at math, you know, math is in my genes, to like, they created this math activities that I'm now working with them again to make a booklet that other moms can do. So that is spending. What are some of the implications with this work that I do? I specifically just did this study. I wanted to talk about research, practice, and policy because some of you might not go into a PhD. You might do a PhD in policy, or you might do a master's and think about this idea of research, practice, and policy. And one of the things that I really like to affirm in using co-design is to really, it is a collaborative process that really motivates families to think that they can do the formal learning at home through their own ways of knowing. That they have a way to introduce math to their kids, and that's okay. It doesn't matter if the formal classroom tells you it has to be 1, 2, 3, 4 in a specific way, because as a teacher, you have a curriculum, and who creates that curriculum? Create the curriculum that you implement as a teacher. The district, right? So it's different. A district person might not understand las culebras, calabras, escuelas board game that the mom did for math, but it doesn't mean that the mom doesn't know math. For practice, how did then we support educator capacity to understand what is funds of knowledge, right? Because you probably have read funds of knowledge work, right?
Yeah.
This is funds of knowledge. But how do you translate that in the classroom? Right? Like it is kind of like you can read so many papers about funds of knowledge, but there's still that operationalization that is not happening that we're missing. So how do we translate that? We want to train teachers and recognizing that maybe if they're doing a math activity, they can talk to their children about what they do at home and bring it together. Or as simple as creating like a parent letter that will let the parents know that they're doing a math activity, and that they can bring cookie and they can bring field work to the table. For policy, I think really thinking about how do we continue to embed the methods? I love that more districts are implementing co-design because that is also kind of a policy-based component and foundation. Like it has to come from the top to be able to really understand it instead of coming down from the top as leaders to engage the families to be able to do that work. I'll stop in the study. Anybody questions before I move to the second slide?
You talked about your utilization of pláticas with families. How did you go about like gathering families and then even just engaging them in the pláticas? Because I was at a conference recently and I did a plática with Latina educators, and I thought it was really awesome, especially culturally to tie it. But like, how do you do that in the classroom setting with people that aren't educators, I guess?
People that are not educators, you mean like how do you engage
Like the parents or like, you know, guardians or whatever, because
I think it takes definitely, this is what I tell people with relationship building. Relationship building has to be a big part of your research or your practice. It took years for me to build a relationship with the families for them to trust me. And this is why sometimes I even mention about acknowledging the challenges of my positionality. I look like the moms that I work with, I speak the same language, it doesn't mean we're. So I still have to build that trust, and I still need to make make a relationship that is based on trust and care. Care, because anybody here have pedagogy, you have to care, right? Like you have to make sure that there is meaning to it, and not just like, let me do the research and peace out. I'll see you when I see you again or when I need you. And it's building that relationship that allows me to do that work with them, for them to feel comfortable, and for them to feel like I trust you and I can let go of my worries and engage in a math activity. That I think it's only possible if you build those relationships. I am having challenges in Portland. I moved in Portland in September 2024, and I'm meeting with families. But again, just because I look like them, I speak Spanish, so doesn't mean we're the same, guys. It's been taking a while. I'm supposed to start an ethnography this summer, so fingers crossed. I just sent a progress report saying, don't have any data, but you know what? It's totally fine because I'm building those relationships. And that has to always be the foundation of my research. And if a funder gets matched, nothing I can do, right? The work that I do is very participatory. So I care about families first and come first to the work that I do. Did I answer your question? I'm gonna go, yes.
Sorry. There's been a big rise in state legislation encouraging family engagement, but the most common way that they do that specifically, this is for literacy, so it's different than math, is just by saying schools are required to provide materials for parents to use at home with their students. What are your thoughts on that? Because it's more of like, here's this, you have to use it, but it's not equitably, or there's no collaborative process on that. It's just here you go, it's a requirement.
And that's everywhere. And there's a reason for why, right? Policy, you have to go through mandates, and sometimes when you're in a district, you have just to follow the mandates that they've been given to you to follow, right? That's why they call it mandates. You have to do them. And then the meaning gets lost as to why you're doing that work, because then it just becomes a requirement for, or it becomes a requirement for. I don't like that. And that's why I'm glad that districts, like the project that you mentioned, are working with a district for engagement. If you go to there's another publication that I did. I start with the Spanish saying, like, I'm gonna say in English, not only my kids learn, but I'm learning. I asked families, what were their reflections after the COVID transitions, and that's what they said. And they mentioned, they expected us to do family engagement, but they sent us to a room and they put in a PowerPoint, and they're like, family engagement completed, yay! Everybody at school, clap for school, clap for parents. And so the parents were like, I want to learn too. I'm an adult. We all want, you all are adults and are learning. That's why you're doing this program. That's why you want to go to PhD, because you want to continue learning and do this work, right? So parents are the same. They never got to learn and they want to learn. And so when a school district, an organization thinks that fulfilling family engagement by just putting a PowerPoint and telling them what they should do instead of engaging them, we don't really make progress that way, right? And so part of what my work also advocates is for that. How do we move from family engagement to family learning, and for them to continue to learn in a home, informal settings?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So with a three-part question, but I'm gonna just give you, I'm gonna give you.
Yeah.
But how were you able to elect the different methodologies that you use to gather your data with the different levels of education that these mothers have been exposed to, whether it be from their countries or even maybe small levels of like exposure and education here? And how can we assure that the practices that they've utilized or that they've learned throughout, their upbringing can actually be used as like tools for the new math that's being taught, or the new techniques that are being taught in math now? Because the way math is being taught now, I don't use circles, to divide and stuff like that, but there's certain practices that they're using now that it's like, so it's confusing. So how were you able to kind of make sure that those tools or those methodologies worked in your different groups for your participants?
A beautiful question. And that's when I said that a lot of people are starting to use it and they don't understand it and it's messy. It's because it's really messy. When I was submitting my IRB, I couldn't tell them what I was going to do. Because I needed to talk to them, needed to interview them. I couldn't say, I'm gonna use this method. Do I have a method real quick? I'm gonna fast forward and then I'm gonna go back and show you. I think I have a picture of a method that I use. Okay, I couldn't tell them, I'm gonna use this prompt because I didn't have it until I finished interviewing the parents. The IRB process took literally almost a whole year of me crying and explaining to them like, you don't know what I'm trying to do here. My advisor, because this was my first project for my program, my doctoral program, my advisor advocating for me to make them understand that we couldn't have the protocol until we worked and I talked to the families, right? And so that was the approach. So it's messy, that's why I say it's messy, but it's wonderful because it took so much time for them to finally understand. I don't even have an interview protocol because I don't want to go in with pre-existing ideas or pre-existing ideas of what they want. I want to listen first and take notes and look what their data is telling me by listening, right? And that's how I ended up developing resources. And it was very much like, it was during COVID, so it was like, let's get on a Zoom on a one-on-one and talking. And it was a 40 to 60 minutes, but the more you build that trust with them, how long do you think they lasted? Like 3 hours, I think, of talking with them, right? It's very time consuming, but it was for me helpful to understand, for example, things, and you can find more of this on the publications, this is the presentations, so I have to go quickly. But it was there, I learned terms like, oh, I used to go to papelerias, right? Like, that was very insightful for me because the box that I put together with the resources and that I sent to parents during the pandemic, I ended up naming the boxes papelerias. It was like a papeleria and the name of the mom. So for example, if the mom was called Rosa, I would say papeleria Rosa. Because they told me that that's what they would go when they were little in their home countries. Because who has heard of papeleria? It's kind of like an arts and crafts store in here. And so they would go there, right? And I even grew up with them. So I couldn't tell the IRB, I'm gonna do that because that didn't even come up until I talked to them. Does that make sense?
No, it
Am I
does.
making sense? Yeah.
And the last two parts were, real quick, so, how much time did you spend with the mothers before actually gathering your data to be able to develop that trust with them? And how, if at all, did the conversation around advocacy or activism come up with them around being able to like develop STEM and their experience and incorporating their experience in that development?
The relationship, like I said, was super important for me. So I reached out to organizations that have family engagement programs and I asked, are you having a parent meeting? Can I go and introduce myself? Can I go talk to the parents before I even say, hey, come and participate in the study, right? And I even offer my services to the organization as well, because it wasn't only building the relationship with the parents, it was building the relationship with the organization. Again, when we start thinking about research, especially when I go to a PhD, the word research and Excel is about extracting knowledge, right? And being like, bye, I just take away your knowledge and I'm gonna go and use it for my benefit. That's why I have this question for all of you. Think about who gets benefited and who gets harmed. And so I didn't want the organization to think, how do we wanna use you? How can I do some parent workshops in Spanish? Can I come and train your teachers with some of my experience? And it was a sort of exchange in collaborations and knowledge and skills that also help build that trust with the families. And the families got to know me as like, oh, Susie, la que hace los talleres. You know what I mean? They didn't know who I was. They didn't know like Susie. They were like, oh, Susie, the one who does the workshops. They weren't like, oh, Susie, the student, right? Like that, they didn't get to know me back then by that. They got to know me as like the person who does the workshops in her area and get to. So that was really helpful and that's a wonderful work for me. And that was also what it was hard to explain to IRB. I don't have a protocol for an interview with an organization because it's all about listening and building that trust. And it's hard to put that in a protocol. So I saw somebody else raise their hand before I continue.
Yeah, but if we're doing questions at the end, I'll
Oh,
wait
questions
so
at
that
the
you can get through some.
I want to go through some of the stuff so you can see more about the methods and the stuff that I do. This is the postdoc. This is my study that I did for the postdoc. So I did that work in my course-assigned mathematics work as a doctoral student. I'm in my PI at a conference, and my postdoc PI was like, "Come and work with me. I have been doing this book. Can you do a co-design?" And I was like, "Sure." Before we do it, because he was doing an intervention and randomized, and I think we finished it last year. He finished it because I left, but he was in a randomized control trial, very traditional developmental psychology intervention that happens post-delay test. And I asked him, can we do something that is truly made with families before we do the intervention? Because again, when we think about interventions, we think of the traditional academic way that we get trained, pre, post, and post-delay. And we'll use this math book or we'll use this other book. So we wanted to create the math ebook before the families got to use it. So we implemented co-design methodology. So, and all of this is actually, you can see I did that on Zoom. I don't have permission for the parents, I have to blow their faces, but you can see we did that on Zoom. And then has anybody here Miro? Like a project management thing? You have like a project management thing. We use that to use post-its and to kind of quickly get findings through like what they were telling us and kind of cluster them on coding and things like that. And so we did that really fast to get to do the ebook. And so then that was the first step, the interviews, listening, what they want in the book before we get to prototype. And then we work with them to prototype the book. And they were telling us things like, well, I want questions because I don't know what kind of questions to ask my kid if I read the book. I want to see questions, example of questions that can help me guide them. I want the book bilingual. That was a big thing. They wanted Spanish and English on the same page so that they can go back and forth. And they even got to tell everyone Spanglish. I was advocating for Spanglish. It was on my project. It was my postdoc project. So he said no. If it was, I'd probably be like, we put it in Spanglish. And you know what is Spanglish? What do you mean Spanglish? We have, for example, the word parking. When you translate that to Spanish, is the correct word is estacionamiento. But a family might use parqueadero, which is mixing the Spanish and the English together, right? And so a lot of the families wanted that because that's their experience in the US, that they want to see themselves reflected in the language that way. So we prototype it, and then we work with an ad developer who works to make diverse books. And that was another thing that I highly encourage when I consult with organizations, with other research projects, about working with diverse people that are creating those products, right? Like this was like a Black-owned organization, women-owned organization that develops apps. And we work with them to really also help them understand how do we put this book together. So this was the very basic prototype. And we have here, you can see picnic. We use picnic. And guess what the moms tell us about using picnic? Well, we didn't use that. They used the campus. So we ended up switching it. But that's what the iteration that happens. You want to continue listening and talking to them and taking back the product for them to tell you, you know what, yes, we want a Spanglish, but actually I don't really want a Spanglish because we don't use picnic. We only use parqueadero. So we want picnic to be reflected. We want on the other campus to be reflected, right? And so you want to listen to that. And so you want to be able to reflect your iterations in the book to do that. And so then we ended up doing the questions. Remember in the first, I talked you about the prototyping of the questions that we did. We did those on Excel. On PowerPoint with the moms. They were having so much fun doing the PowerPoint. And then we turned them into an actual levels of questions. And you can see here that when the mom, they finish reading and then they tap on the little elephant, the question will pop for them to ask that question to the child and engage them in dialogic reading. So we wanted, part of the intervention was also looking into dialogic reading questions. And so we wanted to see what were some of the questions that the moms asked, because it will reflect what they want to ask their children, and other parents might feel the same way. We also added iteration, voice iteration, because a lot of the parents were telling us, you know, I don't speak English and my child speaks English, primarily in the classroom. And then she corrects me or he corrects me or they correct me when I try to speak English. And I want to show my child that I am learning. And that was so beautiful to hear. And then like we want a narration, we want somebody to narrate the study so that we can listen and we know how to say the word in English the correct way. And so that was something that we also did. So we hired Rosie, who's also a bilingual voiceover actor. She's Latina. And she did, I don't think I have the music for all of you. I used to have it on another PowerPoint. But she did both the English and the Spanish. And one of the things that we also discovered with the parents is that they didn't want Rosie to have an accent. You guys know why? What do you think parents didn't want the narrator to have?
And want their kids to develop an accent, maybe?
I'm close.
They wanted the language modeling for them.
Besides that, it has to do with social political factors. What do you think they didn't want the accent?
People who, this is not what I believe, but there's a kind of common racist belief that people with accents are less proficient in English.
They didn't want to be discriminated because their whole life they were like, people think I'm stupid because I have an accent, right? People think I'm not smart because I have an accent. So they didn't want that. And so that was beautiful to also see how vulnerable these families were feeling and to be able to provide something that they can listen and feel that they can practice at home with their children. So you all would right. Those are good, valid questions, but also when you start doing research and practice, you also want to think about the socio-political context and historical factors that will come together that can affect a product like a math ebook. And so we really thought about designing this math ebook. That's not the real ebook because I didn't have time to find the real picture. I apologize. They really thought we really thought that we got a really good ebook to families to use in the actual intervention that we just finalized before I moved to Portland in September. So we're just about to start the analysis for that because we did the pre, post, and post delay. So again, very traditional developmental psychology intervention, randomized trial, but we wanted to develop the product first in co-design in partnership and collaboration with the families before they got to use it at home with their children. And what that wouldn't that be so cool that all the parents get to use materials? They're like, I did that, I developed that, I co-created that. So the implications for this, my favorite one is design with families, not just for them. And that's the same thing with PBS Kids. I love public media, but what do you think the PBS Kids content comes from?
I don't know if it's right.
TV.
I was gonna say like white male writers usually.
Producers, yeah, white male producers, right? Tends to be the writers of different TV shows. And so that was some of the issues that I have also with public media. Like we're creating content with children, but we're still not creating it in partnership with families and children to be able to do this work, right? When we think about practice, how can you really think about making math relational and emotional with students, right? That is when you start seeing really good data, like the one that they're like, we don't want to be discriminated because we want to learn English the correct way. Or we want to really make it more relational, like a way for me to ask questions to my child when I finish reading the book, because I might not know the questions and I want to be able to engage with them. And then for the policy, right? Like how do we scale what worked in this intervention to ensure that other families are doing something similar, other projects, can scale it up in the way that might work for their own community and context. So I'll stop here before I go to the third study with any questions. Otherwise, we can save them for the end. Okay, the third question. So this was a project also about co-designing STEM. And this was a project that the funder wanted us to co-design computational thinking resources. Has anybody heard about computational thinking? Like coding. Like coding, has anybody heard of Scratch? You code in Scratch. I'm trying to think about other games where you code. Yeah, is anybody a little bit familiar with it? Or maybe kids that you probably teach in the school or high schoolers. So the funder wanted us to think about computational thinking. And I was like, wait, I don't even think the parents in LA, the parents that we work with, even understand computational thinking. So again, we can't create a program, a research without talking to families first. And so we were able to convince the funders to let us do what we wanted to do. Very hard, but they were like, okay, fine, do what you need to do. And we asked families, do they even understand computational thinking in Spanish and English? And then we're like, no. And then we have to give them a sort of reframing of what computational thinking is in their own words. And then we ask them to let us know based on what we told them and how we reframe computational thinking, how are they thinking about computational thinking? What do you see at the top? Critical thinking. That's a lot of the parents. They don't understand computational thinking as computational thinking, but they still know what it is. Because what is computational thinking? What is coding? Critical thinking, right? Learning how to do it step by step. And so it's really surprising for us to see, why do we keep using words that don't reflect what the parents know? That funds of knowledge, that language. Why do we keep insisting on using computational thinking? Well, maybe we can just say, you know, going deeper, questioning what you first see isn't the whole study. Isn't that like super cool for them to be like, yeah, you're coding something, but that's not the whole study, because then what happens if you're creating a game? The final game is going to be a different image, right? They were telling us everything that is computational thinking, except the actual term computational thinking, because they don't get it. They don't understand it. And so we did the same thing. We use very low-tech resources for this. We just send them papers, pencils, and colors to describe at home and engage with. If they were having family with them, kids, you understand about how are they thinking about literacy, communication, and social language. And for this one, we have bilingual parents. We have parents who speak Spanish, that were Latine, but speak English only, or they were bilingual in Spanish and English. So again, they did not resonate. We also use two other terms, world work, because the funder wanted us to think about career readiness. And a lot of parents don't understand about, did you all even understand what is career readiness? How would you describe career readiness?
Ready for career.
Right? So like, we're like, maybe if we rename it world of work, parents might get it more. And then we also, that we're also interested in literacy, and how are those part of still literacy a component of computational thinking and career readiness. And so we reframe all of that content into more relatable, skill-based concepts like problem solving and teamwork, and families were more engaging creativity and confidently in finally understanding what coding was. This paper is under review. Hopefully get this up. Question? You can all accept it and read it. But it also, a big thing that I think exists. There is the disconnect between academic language, and when I mean academic language, formal language that happens in the classroom, and what's happening outside. Because the way that kids are learning in the classroom is not the same that parents are communicating with. Right? They're talking to their children differently. So how do we make that connection? How do we take care of that connection? How do we take care of that disconnect? Something that I wanted to continue to explore, because that was the big finding for me. And that work was like, what's happening here? There's a lot of research already, but there's something there. So that is under review, hopefully gets published. Share the paper. But what are the, oh, I forgot the little fancy boxes on that one. What are the implications of this work when it comes to research, address gaps in the state language by aligning formal concepts to families' lived experience, right? Bridging the home and school learning through neighborhood-based concepts. This, I didn't really explain it before, so apologies for that. It's on the paper, but we took career readiness and computational thinking and literacy to reflect the neighborhood. what did they see in that neighborhood, right? When it comes to computational thinking, it comes with literacy, and when it comes to STEM components. And then really thinking about policy, how do we continue to invest in initiatives and really think about embedding this methodology to understand what's happening between how families engage with children at home and in the classroom. Oh, there it is, but it was all different. Okay, last study, I have so many studies, but I wanted to showcase only this first. Last one, this is with permission of parents. We were co-designing an educational website during COVID-19. We wanted to be, this one we already had an idea. We're like, we're gonna do a website that focuses on math and literacy because classrooms are closed and kids need to learn their ABCs and the 1, 2, 3. And we're gonna go straight to math and literacy. So we have all of this were held over Zoom, but again, still try to make it very creative, sending them boxes, resources that where they can engage at home, and having interviews. Again, before I start doing the methods, how do I continue to engage interviewing and listening to then develop everything that you see here? So, how do the interviews then gave me this idea to develop this prompt that I was thinking about as a parent caregiver. I want to learn about during the COVID-19 with the children. As a parent caregiver, I wish I knew. And then as a parent caregiver, I found this, another parent caregiver in my life. And that was a prompt that I took from the interviews, right? That's why it's so important to listen. I didn't have this protocol, so I couldn't tell the IRB I'm gonna use it. We were pissed again. I was like, I don't know what to tell you. This is co-design. After like 3 studies, I still don't, and they changed the IRB person. Anyway, so I use that and I send the resources. You can see this like an iPad, a phone, and we ask parents, this is gonna be an educational website. What did you want to see? The content. And what did you notice? This is not a trick question. What do you notice?
There's lots of Spanish.
What else?
Like routines in the home.
Yeah,
Cooking,
Cocina.
taking of that.
Cooking. Remember, this was during COVID-19, the pandemic, the intense begin months. What else? If you see cooking, family routines, what does that translate to? No, like what does it translate into? Like parents wanting to develop their what?
Social.
Their social emotional, right? Their mental health. So do they think they were interested in math? I mean, there was one parent that was. Like, yeah, math. And I was like, yeah. But if you notice everybody else, they literally tell us, we don't want math. I want and learn. I don't know if I put the image here. Because there was like Q1 here. I don't think I had the image. Anyway, I have to find it later. A lot of the parents were like, I want to learn how to control tantrums. And a parent came out with the actual, the actual article about like tantrums 101, right? And it was so cool to see that, right? And then we're like telling us about everything else, things that they do, like things that, this is like a mom drew this. Look at how creative all these parents were.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Look at all the creativity.
So cute.
This is like, and then we're like, well, not creative. And then you ask them, who do you think is creative? And then we're like, again, who did they think they thought they were creative people are?
Educated.
Educators, teachers, right? They were like, oh, people on TV, the people that make Disney. I was like, no, you can be creative too. And so again, families wanted a website that was visually engaging, intuitive, culturally familiar, not culturally beyond race and ethnicity. And we also talk about culture, and really thinking of a struggle because the parents continue to struggle with academic terms like community corner, special sense, and explainer to the kid, right? Because they don't want that. They don't want any special activities. They don't want any math activities. They're like, I'm having a hard time. My mental health is declining at a specific moment. So how do I engage my kid in soft skills? Because that is priority for them, right? And so that's when you use co-design. That's when you end up finding what the parent wants versus what we think we wanted, which we wanted to do math and literacy because the schools were closed. And here parents were telling us, using this specific term, not trademark it, they said, you can be the Mr. Rogers of the internet. Has anybody heard Mr. Rogers watching the service, right? You had a question or?
No, I was just.
You heard, yeah. So think about Mr. Rogers and how the social emotional content and feelings he invoked. And families were looking for that at the time, right? They were like, you can do Mr. Rogers of the internet, all these wonderful ideas that they gave us. So again, conducting research that is cultural, linguistic, diverse, and again, diverse language, equity beyond race and ethnicity, but it's looking at what's happening in the home culture that they want, and that is social emotional content, right? The co-design for practice, co-design is not a one-off. So how do you continue to engage in the co-creation with families? Again, not to just be like, let me extract your creative knowledge and won't see you again. The families that started with me doing the math activity are the same families. I continue on these 3 different projects. So some of them, I have new ones that came in. And about policy, allocating resources to community design content that reflects the diverse aspects of families, specifically at the home, right? Again, we thought they wanted in math and literacy, and they were like, forget that. Tell me how to calm my child, because I have to be with my child 24/7. And they need that resource. So here are some principles. This paper is published on the Journal of the Qualitative Research. So it's more about methodologies if you want to read that paper. And really thinking about co-designing in a way that maximizes opportunities for relationship building, trust, and really setting a foundation for families to co-create, co-design, and collaborate, make learning useful for problem adaptation. So everything that the families were telling us, we took that into consideration and we put it into the tools research program, so everything that they give us. Infuse culture resonance with equity. How do you really think about making equitable? Really listening to them and facilitate that process through the prompts before telling them what to do. And listen, sounds basic, but really listening is really listening to the families that I've been working with is what's really been giving me ideas for the prompts and for the approaches that I use and how to get them. So you can find, and empower families. You can find more of this in the paper that I published. And that's it. A lot of time for questions. I still have my question.
I have 2. The first one is how long, I mean, they might not all be the same, but how long on average is the co-design process? And how can teachers implement it in like a family student engagement plan outside of research, just kind of like in the classroom? Do you think that's doable? How would it look different?
I think it's doable. I think I'll tell a lot of teachers that I used to do a lot of trainings with before I went into more like my academic field, that even by just asking parents to participate with them on an activity so that she can listen, that is already using participatory research methods, right? Because again, listening is the primarily part of it that takes time. I can also understand why many educators are really bombarded with curriculum, with things that you have to do, and you're like, well, now I have to do that. Family engagement is not a priority. It's kind of like an add-on, right? And so how do then educators can make it easy? I tell them, give them a quick survey, right? Like, what do you want to do? What are you doing at home that I can sort of maybe implement in the classroom? This teacher that I was working with, what was like a group of pre-service teachers, no, in-service teachers, or preschool teachers. And I was telling them that my research find out that parents don't use like standardized measure, right? They don't cook with like 2 cups, right? So like, yeah, sprinkle it or like al tanteo, or they don't they go to the tailor and they don't tell them the inches. They like use the fingers, right? And she developed this awesome activity to get the children to understand the difference between standardized and non-standardized measurement, and it was so cool. And I was like, I want to do it. I want to do this. It was so cool. But she took that idea not from my research by asking the parents, how do you measure at home? And I think the parents, and it was like a quick text. She used Class Mojo or Dojo, whatever that is called. And she used that and kind of sound like a quick message. And her reflection through Platicas with them, because that was a project that I did with Platicas through Reflections, they were like, oh my gosh, the parents replied really quick and they were excited because she was engaged in them and something that the parents were interested in, right? A lot of the times when you're doing things for a kid, the focus is gonna be the kid, which is fine. But you miss a parent. A lot of the parents were telling us things like, we don't get to learn, like the content that it's always created by kids, great, but what if I'm on the bus to go to work and I do want to learn how to teach my kid shapes and patterns? Is there a video from me as a parent? Is there something that I can learn? That's why I'm trying to figure out how do we move from like engagement to learning, because all these families want to learn and want to do things. But yeah, she sent on a quick survey or text and she just was like, how do you measure at home? And send me pictures of how do you use. And she took all of that. She then created this activity with very simple activity. The strawberry basket, the green ones where the strawberries come. And I forgot what else she used, but it was super cool. It was like all of that, and she did the activity in the classroom, and the kid was like, oh, that's like the strawberries that my mom gave, like that was the like right away the reflection of like, how do you kind of connect that, like what the kid is doing at home. And it was like a balance, like a non-standardized measurement versus standardized measurement. I'm not sure if I find it, and then I can send the links with me too. She gets it with all of you because it was such a cool activity.
And we're going to take a break first, and then we'll save your wonderful questions for our workshop later, so everybody you could get food and I could feed you, and then we will give food later. I'm sorry. Like, but yeah, take a break. But
Save 30 minutes.